collaboration is not something which was which was just something which has come now and it's a buzzword. In fact, it's over the millennia. I mean, whether we talk of it in gurukuls or whether we talk of it with the Jewish Talmud when they talked about learning together, or we talk about Seneca, who talked about it in the Roman civilization when he talked about peer learning, collaboration has been around forever. And as far as the 19th century is concerned, I know that it became a very important model for understanding, and it was emphasized in a lot of schoolrooms. But India sort of got caught up in this awful competition mold because of colonial education. And I think it kept making individualism extremely important for both learning and livelihood. And we can see that the way it is disseminated in the board examinations, because they have become very individualized markers for marks, so to speak. So we are now stepping into a very intense collaborative world, whether it is the national education policy or even the previous policies that came before it. The most interesting thing is that the pandemic tore apart the curtain. And it's tragic that we need a virus to tell us which way to go. Because the pandemic really made us believe that it's Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. The world is interconnected. And that if we need disasters, do we really need disasters to tell us that? I think it is important that today we collaborate in learning, in health, in distribution, and in the whole context of productivity, because if we don't do it, the clock, my friends, my colleagues and teachers, is ticking. I'm sure you've read Ken Robinson's books, and Ken Robinson talks about some marvelous examples in his book, The Element, or in his books in Going Back to School. But what I would like to bring up is the latest book that Ken Robinson has released posthumously is Imagine If. And I would like you to read that little. It's like a novella. It's a small little book, which gives you a very interesting view on collaboration. So please get it from the Amazon. It's a brilliant book that I will be referring to as I talk about the collaborative model and set the context for that. So you may as well ask, what has this got to do with what I'm going to do in the classroom? How do I do a takeaway with all this that she's talking about, the Talmud and Seneca? But what I want to tell you is that school is a microcosm. It is a microcosm of that great macrocosm called life. And we have to understand and come together for a common goal. And what better place than to start integrating it from preschool onwards? If I could help it, I would integrate it in the mother, in the womb, when the child is listening to it, very much like, I think Abhimanyu, wasn't it, who heard it. So I think competition may bring us success, my friends, but collaboration will bring you livelihood. Remember that, particularly today, where the learners and the next generations that you're going to see coming up are going to use the greatest collaborative tool, which is technology. And you can see that happening. So if we're not collaborating technologically, you and I are going to be complete dinosaurs. So we need to be relevant in that context. So what is the next step to collaboration? What is it? Is it making students responsible not only for themselves, but also for others, but also by allowing them to understand the intuitive use of technology? Now, when I look at let's go into a classroom and let's look at a collaborative classroom. What does it look like? It can be done in an ordinary manner. You can collaborate. You can do it with your body. You can collaborate. You can collaborate with it kinetically. You can collaborate with it visually. You can collaborate with it through audio. You can collaborate it through creative understanding or imagination, or just through physical interpersonal relationships. Have you ever been in a situation where you felt that what you're speaking, what you're understanding, your ideas, your thoughts are in no way reaching the other? The projects that you may be creating, there is no perspective that the other has of you. Invariably, I have been in many situations in my life like that, when I keep listening and I say, what is he saying? I'm not connected with it. Children are constantly facing that. They're not connected with you half the time in the classroom as to what you're talking, or with me as to what I'm talking about. So how do we do this? How do we bring the ability in our children at the classroom level, which we need so much in our school, in our homes? We have to collaborate with the outlaws and the in-laws that we have in our homes, with organizations where we have to collaborate with our bosses. So how do we do that? It's extremely involving. So the students are faced with the same situation of collaboration today. So we need to give them those abilities to share ideas, to share concepts, to come together with a combined answer without conflict. I think that's what we can initiate as a collaborative model, as a concept of a collaborative model in a class. Because opposing views are something that creates dissonance. I am tired of dissonance. COVID has created enough dissonance in our lives. Let's now create resource pools. Let's create integration. Let's create understanding. And I think that's very, very essential. So as Ken Robinson said, that today children have to learn through compassion. I heard that word, Gavin. I heard another friend of mine who's mentioned in her chat the word compassion. I think it's so important that compassion, creativity, and collaboration is what you and I need to bring into our classroom. The rest, my friends, will follow. And so there's a variety of skills you and I will learn. We will learn how to manage our time if we collaborate. Imagine 40 children doing 40 different things. How awfully boring, you know. But if we come together, resource allocation, we don't need so much. Today we need money. We don't have so much money. We've lost our jobs. Many teachers are not being paid properly. Our schools are not getting the fees. We need resources. Can we distribute our resources in a manner that we can all work through this? And most of us, as teachers, I know, believe in collaboration. But have you ever seen, you hand over a laptop to your child, is just connected with a laptop, he won't even turn to look at the peer, and sometimes he'll say, oh, what's the point, or complain about a lazy teammate who will not be connecting with him or her. So promoting real collaboration, we have to integrate it into the curriculum. So let's talk about these several strategies, okay, which I'm sure my colleague will further elucidate in his conversation. So let's create complex learning activities, one. And what is it? For example, a complex learning activity allows you a positive interdependence. That's very, very interesting because it allows you multi-layered thinking. It allows you stimulation. It allows you engagement, right? So what do? I'll give you an example. Why don't you give an example to a child and say, create an activity where you want to balance the population in your area, in your zone, in your cluster, and balance it in such a way that it is environmentally friendly. So how do you bring green zones? That will automatically create a situation where children will start discussing and thinking. Or look at a traffic signal and say, how will you prevent traffic snarls? And give that as a project. And they will collaborate and they will discuss and they will come together with a common solution. And that's extremely essential. So one, create a complex situation. Second, prepare them for teams. Now, let me tell you, there was, I'm forgetting the name, it should come to me, I think Tuckworth or something. He was an American psychologist. Please look him up. I mean, this is my age, I've forgotten. And you know, he believed that there were these 5 important things that you have to look at. And they were starting with forming. You form your little group. And do not form more than 3 to 5, let me tell you. Otherwise, you'll have social loafing. I'll talk to you about that later. So forming. And you have forming, and then you have storming. Now, that's the worst time, storming, because that's when you will have people who will leave the group, who will fight with each other, who will want to be a leader. And that's when, as a facilitator, you have to involve yourself in forming, in storming. Then you will have norming. Then you will start norming and normalize the situation, start preparing. And then you will have performing. And that's when you will perform and come and give a presentation. And then you will have 2 more things that he added later. He talked about adjourning. Then you may break up the group. You may bring in some other group. You may bring in a new activity. And that way, through forming, storming, norming, performing, adjourning, you will then create transformation in your classroom. So transformation is what you will bring out in a classroom. If you go slowly, strategize this slowly, you know, say, I'm going to do collaboration. I'm going to do collaboration. First, see, how are you going to create those groups? What are the groups you're going to create? Are they dissonant groups? You have to look at that in a very careful. Minimize free riding. What do I mean by minimize free riding? I mean that don't allow a group to have a person who takes the grades of everybody else and does no work. That is why none of your group should be more than 3 to 5 students, each student accountable. Otherwise, it becomes very, very resentful for the child who has skills and who's sharing those skills. So this is a sociological term called social loafing. You must have found it. You'll find it even in adult groups. There's one group going around saying, "Main to dekh raha hu, I'm watching. What are you doing? What are you doing? I'll take a pencil, I'll sharpen it, I'll erase something, I'll cut a piece of paper," but they will not have any intellectual stimulation. Please do not allow that to happen in a collaborative enterprise in your classroom. And of course, another important aspect is building opportunities. Build an opportunity in your groups for consensus, because you have to develop this consensus in your classroom where children come together. And that's what diplomacy, that's what moving forward, that's what negotiation for. And 21st century negotiation skills, otherwise there's another Ukraine and another Putin going. So we have to bring in negotiation. And then we have to strengthen and stretch the skill. How do we strengthen? We strengthen the skill because we have a collaborative model. We have students who are working in that collaborative model, but we have to stretch the expertise. You have a child who's very good at a particular skill, and that child is helping the others. Please ensure she gets a better grade in that context. So you will evaluate and assess individually and also collaboratively. Don't let a child who's doing well say, oh, we're all getting A. Why? She may do an A+, because she's the one who taught the skill. Do not forget that child who's taught the skill. This awful assessment system that the CBSE has, in the earlier days that the CBSE had, everybody is getting 100, everybody is getting 99. What happens to the poor kid who's really studying and working the midnight oil and how? In any case, assessment is a very problematic point, which I don't want to get in. So we have to ensure that students just don't occupy physical space, they stretch, they involve themselves and so on. So use these exercises of how you strategize collaboration. Stump your partner. I'm sure some of you have done the IIM courses. You have these issues where suddenly, you have to turn around and ask your friend a question, and the friend has to give you another question, an answer. So call it stump your friend, stump your pal, stump your buddy, okay? Think and act in pairs and share. 2. Sometimes you have 2, sometimes you have 3, sometimes you have stumping. Catch up. As a teacher, suddenly be silent and turn around and say, okay, guys, I've just said something. Why don't you discuss between each other what you said, and now come up to me and give me a presentation of what you said. Give me a 1.5 minute, and keep things tight and keep things quick. Let's not be boring. Time is the element. Of course, the fishbowl debate. Gavin talked about how we're all sitting in fishbowls, We're all available. We're all viewable. We can be seen, especially in today's climate. So create a fishbowl for children. So create a fishbowl in the fact that all the children are sitting around. Suddenly you pick up 3 people and say, okay, everybody, talk to them. Those who are, I remember once in a political science class that I was taking years ago, though I'm not a teacher of politics, but I love political science. And I took up political science and I said, okay, the yeas on one side, the nays on one side, the fence sitters in the middle. And after the class, nearly halfway through the class, yeas went to nays, nays went to yeas, fence sitters moved out, some fence sitters moved around. That gives a child a position to think. So create case studies, 4 to 5, but the challenge level has to be the same with the case study, So team-based learning, which you all know about, it's all very simplistic. And of course, group problem solving. How do we solve problems in groups? So whether you do adaptive learning, whether you do what is it called? Connectivity learning. And connectivity, I'm not talking about constructivism, I'm talking about connectivism. So I'm talking about connectivism learning through networking, whether you're learning through adaptive learning, which is the use of technologies and how you work through the where, how, and what of learning. Whether you use the whole idea of flow, of how do you use flow. There are so many wonderful ways of doing collaboration. So the point I'm making is an interesting point I want you to listen to. Collaboration is there in animals. It's there in plants. It's there in people. Why do we collaborate? We collaborate because we have to maintain the health of our organisms. That's extremely important. We are called the World Wide Web. You'd be interested to know that the forests are called the World Wood Web. You know why? Because there are trees that through underground roots nurture those trees in certain forests which don't have sunshine, which don't have sunlight, and they allow them to grow. They collaborate. In our classrooms, there are thousands of children who are sitting in the shade, and there are these trophy children in the light who we put into all our newspapers and say, I got this, I got this, I got this. That trophy child is all over. Please remember the shade. So collaboration will help us to lighten the lives of the children in the shade, my friends. And that is what the issue of collaboration is. Because we must sarvodaya, sabka uday ho ek saath. Gandhi said that. Let's move together. Let's work together. We work at our different abilities. It's not a problem at all. But be, friends, forget World Wide Web. Be the World Wood Web. Bring sunlight into the lives of your children through children who are already lit, and further lighten the lives of the children who are lit. So the students are constantly evolving. They're looking at you. Forget about subjects. I hate subjects. They're in silos. Look at interdisciplinary approaches to everything. Give one homework. That one homework should have all the subjects. So that one homework should encompass in it life, for mathematics, physics, chemistry, human resources, geography, history. Make the interdependence of life. Charitam udar vikara vasudeva kutumbakam. Create a character that encompasses life. And that's what I think it's so important. And so what is the hope for our future, my friends? What is the hope of our future? Rock and roll. I'm sure you've heard of rock and roll. I'm an old lady, so rock and roll, I know you may have heard of disco or something, but rock and roll was not a government-led initiative. Remember that. Transformation does not need legislation. It only needs grassroots level work. And this is where you and I are. We are at the grassroots. We look at little children, at babies. And the greatest collaboration should be done at nursery, kindergarten. I think they are the most brilliant teachers who are in primary sections. Because by the time they reach the senior classes, you've already got a child with you. In fact, I doff my head off to primary and middle school teachers because they are the ones who create the foundations of learning, of knowledge, of wisdom, and so on. So every school has a learning community. Yeah, it has students interacting through relationships. It has students interacting through experiences. It has students interacting through feelings, right? The many different systems. So you have PTAs, you have governors, you have teachers, you have timetables, you have all sorts of things. The point I'm making, we're all in this cosmic soup together. What is the point that I'm making? The point is you have a brilliant curriculum, but you have an awful infrastructure, it will collapse. You have a fabulous infrastructure, but you have a miserable curriculum, and you have bullying and you have lack of wellness in your school, then you will have a toxic atmosphere. We have to have collaborative models at every part that we have in our schoolrooms, right? So the best place to think about change and collaboration is in a school context. If you are a principal, you have to be a collaborator. If you're a teacher, you have to be a collaborator. If you're a parent, you have to be a collaborator. If you're a transport in charge, you have to be a collaborator. At every level, you have to become the wider collaborator. So what is effective education? Effective education is a balance. It's a balance between tradition and innovation. It's a balance between the individual and the group. It's a balance between the rigor and freedom. It's a balance between the inner world and the outer world. That's what education is. And we keep swinging. We keep swinging, and we're trying to find the equilibrium. And the need is urgent, my friend. And the transformation is not only defined by ideas. Create an impact and have an impact report in your school. Have a collaborative audit in your school. Create an audit. Am I a collaborative person? No. Am I? Yes, I am. Where am I not collaborating? You'll see that systems are falling apart where you don't collaborate. So in my mind, I think there are 5 literacies or competencies in my mind which will go on till 2050. They will go on till 2022. I will be dead and gone, 6 feet under. My understanding is that these 4 or 5 literacies or competencies are going to be very, very important in a collaborative classroom. Keep this as a mantra in your mind. The first one is ecological literacy. Don't forget it, because you know today that there are people who are having underwater meetings, right? Because their island is going to disappear. Today, Gavin was talking about going to the North Pole. The other day, I had visited, several years ago, I had visited practically that part of the North Pole, very close to Ravennimi and above. And I noticed, I was given a tour of where all the glaciers were disappearing. So ecological literacy, why? Because if we do not collaborate as a world, we are gone. We are gone. The planet is finished. I mean, it is said by Edward Lorenzo in The Theory of Chaos that if a butterfly flaps its wings in the Amazon, it's a metaphor, you will have a tornado in Beijing. That is the connectivity of life. So teach your children how to collaborate in the classrooms on ecology. on understanding of the environment. So also, which is an SDG 4. And what is an SDG 4? The SDG 4 goal is education, inclusion, and equity. They are both collaborative words. Both of them are collaborative words. Then we get into cultural literacy. Of course, let's not demonize people. Let's collaborate with them. Let's not demonize people on religion, on caste, on creed, on color. Let us collaborate with them. The moment we collaborate, we create a far more peaceful world where we don't tear up the fabric of the world because we're not collaborating. So cultural literacy is the language, the culture, the food, the region. And we need to collaborate in cluster groups. And I think schools are doing a marvelous job with exchanges. And you don't have to do an exchange with a foreign country to an exchange. You can have an exchange in the Northeast. You can have an exchange in the West. You can have an exchange in Divas. You can have an exchange in a tribal area. Spent my life doing these exchanges in the heartlands of India. Then you have the global literacy that I think we're going to be hearing about shortly, in which we enhance the whole understanding of diversity. And of course, digital literacy, without which you can go nowhere, because that is the future. It is abundant and it is contested. So, but you have to be at the same time careful that the human being is not lost. So, my friends, and of course, the most important is emotional literacy. Because the more you collaborate, the stronger you will be in wellness, the stronger you will be in well-being, the stronger you will be in mental health, because you will not be isolated, you will not be marginalized. Do you see how COVID marginalized people? Every second person would say, I'm under a depression, because he was alone. He was alone. How much can you go on the dash Zoom or whatever, though I'm sitting on Zoom here. But the point I'm trying to say to you is emotional literacy is the biggest tool of collaboration. I don't care about education 2.0, 3.0, 4.0. I've been speaking about this for years. Education 5.0. Talk about that. It's about compassion and collaboration. That's how you're going to take your children forward in this way. And I just want to take off, and just before I finish, I don't even know if 15 minutes are over, but if I'm going to finish, I'm going to finish with a small phrase. It's a 2-letter word. As they say, Dhai Akshar Prem Ke. This is imagine if. Now, imagine if is proactive. Okay, it's proactive. It's not prescriptive. It's proactive, and it's endlessly adaptable. Open your classrooms with the word imagine if, guys. Imagine if. Imagine if you could control fire. Imagine if you could fly. Let the child give the answer. Let there be a collaborative group. Imagine if we could land on Mars. Imagine if I could marry a person of the same gender. Imagine if I preferred dance over maths and I said, to hell with you. This is what I like. Imagine if I could cure terminal cancer. Imagine if I could be encouraged, if we could encourage every single person to thrive in the best of his or her own potential. My friend, imagine if we could collaborate and bring a new world into our lives.